There we go. Welcome back to another thrilling installment of, I think we're still calling this Fraggoth Reads. I think that's technically a joke, but, it's certainly stale by now. Oh, I can crank that down. I don't need that high. I don't need to be that high. Anyway, welcome back. I forgot to turn that off. There we go. Good boy. Let's see. What was the other thing? Right. We're reading Regenesis. It's been too long. I don't know how long it's been. It has been a long week, and it is only a couple days in. Also, depending on where you are in the U.S. of A., it is voting day. Vote local, and who knows, maybe change will come, question mark. The electoral process doesn't do much. I could yap and wax rhapsodic at length on how completely broken that system is. But I won't, because life is too short, and I need to control my blood pressure. So what happened last time? Mostly, last time was Ari Emery is pissed and tired and pissed. She's pretty upset that Yanni Schwartz is doing stuff. She views it as behind her back. She views it as behind. Yes, she views it as him doing things behind her back. But she has to be kind of careful because she doesn't want to show her hand in terms of just how much she's able to know. So I think, yes, she is about to confront him. Now, she's not the only one pissed and tired. Jordan Warrick is pretty upset. See, in the wake of everything that happened in the finale of Saitine, so he's back in Raziun. All right, we know that. He's back in Raziun, but he still has the murder of Ariane Emery, Ari Sr., hanging over his head. Even though he's been pretty consistent saying, I didn't do it. Except for, the whole thing, how he took the rap in the first place. And because he's a special, nobody can do like a psych probe to find out if he's telling the truth or not. So basically nobody trusts him. So he's not really allowed to get any work. So he's like going stir crazy. Justin keeps throwing him a bone now and again, but Jordan his father does not appreciate this. Like, he does, but he doesn't. Like, he wants to be in control of his own destiny. He's very upset that his son is working with Ari Younger, and is convinced that, Justin's been brainwashed or whatever, which isn't completely inaccurate. It's complicated. It's complicated. So, yeah. So one of the practical upshots of way back at the beginning of Saitine was that Ariane Emery did some programming on Justin Warrick when he was a youth. And she didn't ever really finish that project. It's not totally clear what her goal was there. It is implied, at least not to me, it is, I think, reasonably strongly implied, and this is one of the things I like about CJ Cherryh, is she doesn't necessarily deal in absolutes. She will leave room for interpretation. It seems to me that what was going on was Ariane Sr. was trying to program him to be better at doing the kind of micro work that would be beneficial to facilitating her macro work. She's working on broad sociological stuff, whereas she needs somebody who's going to be good at, engineering the fixes, the tapes, the little tweaks required to make individuals do things on that broader scale, to go towards that whole thing. Whatever the end goal there is, that's certainly not clear. We know that she has had expressed an interest, not an interest, an ultimate end goal of Ozzy being a very temporary thing. Like, you don't have them anymore. You don't rely on them as slave labor. She was disgusted by that. As well you should be. If you're not, seek help. One of the other practical upshots of the tweaking that she was trying to do on Justin is that it doesn't finish. And so Ari Younger nominally completes the job. Now, part of this is, I believe, a degree of enforced loyalty. However, of Justin to her. However, part of it's that she is actually helping him. And he kind of knows this. Like, he realizes on some level that, yes, he's being manipulated into this, but you could do worse. It's better than things were under the Nyes, for instance. So he's willing to work with it for now. Jordan, on the other hand, is not quite so sanguine. Pride is at stake there, and he's got a lot of that. He wants steady employment, and Justin is not able to really provide that. He throws him a bone every now and again, but that's about it. He thinks his son is brainwashed to be dead set against him, and Justin is like, you're drunk, I can't talk with you right now. You need to sort some stuff out, there's stuff you're going to have to do on your end. Like, there's got to be a bit of give and take. Even though he is kind of the wronged party here in many ways. If indeed he is not the one who killed Ari Sr. We still aren't totally sure who that was, are we? Anyway, Ari Younger, is about to meet for dinner with Yanni. And they're going to have a chat. This will go probably a bit longer than I anticipated. But that's okay. Alrighty, let's get reader rating. Book 1, Section 1, Chapter 9, April 25, 2424, 1748 hours. "How was Novgorod?" Ari asked purposely, over the shrimp cocktail. "Quiet?" "Agreeably so, actually," Yanni said. He had never yet asked the reason for the dinner invitation. Not uncommon for Yanni. Yanni Schwartz gave very little away, and he'd always accorded the same privilege of reticence to her, since she had been on his good list, or thought she was. He was on Rejuve, of course, dyed his hair, was 80-ish, and looked 40, except that most people that looked 40 weren't 40. He wasn't handsome, but he had a strong face. She liked that face. And it made her feel better that he showed up on time and didn't act guilty at all. As if he was going to have a reason to give her. Oh, she so hoped he had a reason. Something in her unknotted just because he'd come in and met her cheerfully, without a flinch. He'd brought her a trinket from the capital.
Gerard used to do that, and this one, when she unwrapped it, looked even to be from the same company as some of Gerard's gifts. It was a desk sitter, a little glass globe with a hollow insect that crawled in a circle so long as you set it in the light. He had handed it to her before they sat down at table, and she had it by her plate. It kept running, brilliant green armor and serrated jaws, round and round. The gift-giving urge in Yanni was new. She noted that. One thing was sure. Yanni had thought about her when he was in Novgorod, and Yanni had never particularly curried favor. He'd always been fair and expected it in return. Now that he was here, at her table, she could actually quit fluxing and remember Yanni, not the reports she'd found in system. Maybe he had brought her the thing just because it tickled his fancy and made him think of her. In her opinion, that was the way family ought to be. She'd almost begun to think of him that way. Until this last week. "I love the bug," she said. "Beetle," he said. "A glorious beetle." That's with a capital G. "Well, he is, but is that his name?" "Plusiotis gloriosa, native to the western hemisphere of Earth." "He's really that green?" Yanni took a little advert card from his coat pocket and set it in the middle of the table, between them and facing her. "You can actually get a collection of insects. The butterflies were obviously the big item. But you have one of those, I remembered. I thought you'd rather have the beetle." She had Gerard's butterfly. They lately had real butterflies in the conservatory, all sorts of them, but they didn't have a beetle. "I absolutely love him," she said. It had been ages since she'd spent time in the conservatory. Razun sprawled from the high end, where Wing 1 sat, down to the town and the fields, and she hadn't been to the conservatory since, long before the shooting that had brought Dennis down, long before the world had come apart. She and Mama used to go there when she was small, to walk the garden paths and see the flowers. The family that she had once had been broken by Dennis's order. Yanni's family, too. Scattered by the same set of orders, sacrificed to the project that was her, sent out to a distant star station, depriving Yanni of relatives, including stupid Jenna. She wouldn't be surprised if Yanni did resent her, but she hoped he didn't. Lump, 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 in its endless, silent circle. She dropped her napkin over it to remove the distraction, looked Yanni in the eyes. They were brown, direct, hard eyes. "It doesn't have an off switch," Yanni said, "except light." "So there's nothing up I should know about," she said, direct to the point, regarding Novgorod and the legislative session. "Oh, the Paxes are kicking up the usual fuss. We didn't get the remediation increase we wanted, and there's talk about putting an embargo on Earth origin wood veneers." So he wasn't going to get to the topic of secret meetings straight off. So neither did she. "It'll only drive up the price. It won't ever stop the demand, will it?" "It might drive the price far beyond what the average citizen can afford. Take the mass out of the mass market. Earth is claiming its woods are a sustainable resource. We're saying they're not, on an interstellar scale, and we're talking about a 100-year embargo." "If Alliance doesn't go with it," she began. She hadn't been interested at all in that, but a brain cell fired and she couldn't help it. "Alliance is actually going with it." That rated a lift of the brows for an item that hadn't been to the forefront of the news at all. The Alliance kept their hands off their own forested world at Pell, a planet called Down Below, barred exploitation by vote of the station residents, if not the far-flung ship communities that were the greatest majority of that government. So the whole ecosystem of Down Below was protected from intrusion, because practically speaking there was nobody but Pell Station that would mount an expedition down there. The ecological sensibilities of the Alliance capital, however, had not stopped the Alliance merchanters from buying up luxuries out of Sol System hand over fist, which they were selling, hand over fist, to Union. Since the Alliance sat halfway between Union and Sol, a ban on certain Earth products couldn't be meaningful without Alliance compliance. Ooh, that rhymes delightfully, and she'd have bet the Alliance, composed mostly of... let's try this paragraph from the top. I'm sorry. I got distracted by the delightful rhyme. Probably incidental, but nonetheless pleasurable. So yeah, if you were tuning in today expecting to have a bit of a trade economics lesson on the setting of the Alliance Union setting, then congratulations, you get a bingo. So the whole ecosystem of Down Below was protected from intrusion, because practically speaking, there was nobody but Pell Station that would mount an expedition down there. The ecological sensibilities of the Alliance capital, however, had not stopped the Alliance merchanters from buying up luxuries out of Sol System hand over fist, which they were selling, hand over fist, to Union. Since the Alliance sat halfway between Union and Sol, a ban on certain Earth products couldn't be meaningful without Alliance compliance, and she'd have bet Alliance, composed mostly of merchanter families, wouldn't possibly go with it. Uncommon that Alliance and Union, both former enemies, ended up banning something so prized by the rich. Never mind that they could easily synthesize the product. Never mind that there were very good synthetic veneers. Down to the cell structure, if you wanted that. The fact a thing was real aroused a certain lust to possess in certain moneyed circles. People would pay fortunes for what was real and Earth origin. Crazy, in her opinion. Well, she said, so no more wood from Earth? I think it will pass in the Council of Worlds, he said. A lot of talk, a lot of fire and fury and discussion. The spotlight's on the users of certain products, and no senator wants to be tagged as one of the conspicuously rich consumers. They've exempted historical pieces from the ban. I've objected that we'll see an uncommon glut of relics coming out of Earth. And we get one other quiet little provision. The Hinder Stars Defense Treaty gets moved forward. Talks renewed. That's good. It was. So, he said in a changing the subject tone, how are things here? And still no mention of the private meetings. Same as last week, same as the week before. There was some local news, not as dramatic as the ban on wood veneers. The new wing has its foundations laid. Saw that as the plane came in. Looking quite impressive back there. They're mostly finished with the storm tunnels and accesses now. Conduits are going in. And they finished the power plant up at the upriver site. Precip stations are about to go online. Not that much besides a 20-bed residential bunker and a machine shop stood on that remote site yet. The new building, well upriver, was in the early stages, a lot of raw earth and robots at the moment, superintended by a small ASI technical crew and a supervisor, and soon to be occupied by the loneliest and craziest people on Cytine, line runners on the automated precip stations. Fine, he said. And how are your studies going? Oh, good enough. So, archly, are we moving researchers in upriver? We're a few months from that. I don't think I'd like the climate. She didn't like the implication of that, not at all. He'd sensed she was stalking him. He'd got her. She was sure her face had reacted in some dismay. As of now, it had a frown, which she immediately purged. Oh, and what did you do? She asked in her best RE1 mode, in Novgorod. You have to trust me. And now, was he going to bring up those secret meetings? Oh, I do, but I'd really like to know, and you know I'd like to know. Oh, I do, but I'd really like to know, and you know I'd like to know. Well, I agreed with Corraine on a compromise. Fargon's hurting for jobs. His constituency at Fargon is extremely important to him getting re-elected if he's challenged for the seat. So we put in a new lab wing. We get centrist party support on a rider tacked onto that bill because it helps Corraine's constituency at Fargon. And here's the core of it. The Eversnow project gets underway. Eversnow? That hadn't been part of the report. Eversnow. It's a dead project. Not dead. We get a station at Eversnow, a full-blown research station on Eversnow, and a new lab at Fargon that's very quietly aimed at terraforming, exactly as originally planned on Cytine, the centrist's favorite dream, but out there where it's not going to cause us trouble. Her pulse rate was getting up. Her blink rate would be. And he'd read that in a second. So we're suddenly friends with the centrists, and we're terraforming Eversnow, of all things, and producing Alpha Azzy at Fargon. A few. We have a lab at Fargon. The Rubin project was at Fargon. Mostly terraforming research. A clearinghouse for what we learn on Eversnow. Ultimately, Azzy, yes. Alpha production has never left the planet. Our personnel, mind, no release of proprietary secrets. By the time we're bringing any great number of Azzy into the Eversnow system, we'll be on the planet. Azzy production. Full scale by then. You'll be putting together the sets for that population in your lifetime. The Eversnow deal had been dead as long as the first Ari, and Rezun had allowed a prerogative of exclusivity to labs, enabling labs that high-end, that capable, to run out at Fargon, with the possibility of somebody outside Rezun's staff laying hands on the manuals. Bad enough they'd licensed out military thetas to Bucher Labs and had those problems to mop up for the next 40 years of the first Ari's career. They'd never done anything like this. And terraforming? That was a dead issue. None of this is in the news, she said calmly. None of it is going to be in the news. It's under deep cover, disguised as that Azzy lab. But damn it, Yanni. She kept her voice down, kept the whole situation under control, holding the lid on. I assume you've got a very, very good reason. What happened to the remediation budget? It'll wait a year. While we create a terraforming lab out at Fargon? Yes, Yanni said, head on. It was the first Ari's project. It got scrapped. The first Ari isn't alive now. I am. And I have an opinion. You didn't ask me. Where are my budget items, Yanni? Next year. We have 2 labs full of scientists we're going to have to fund till next year, and I'm making a heavy hit on a budget as it is. I know that. So you could have talked about this. Eversnow, for God's sake. And an Alpha lab. What else? We manage the lab, top to bottom. We manage the lab, top to bottom. Our personnel run it. No training of local techs to do anything. They'll all be Rezun people, born here, trained here, retiring here, ultimately. Yanni's voice was so quiet, so reasonable. He wasn't that way with a lot of people. But he knew he'd sneaked this one past her, and he was presenting a case in which she was going to have the say. She'd be in charge when this thing came into full bloom, and Yanni would be gone by then, at least gone from admin and back in the lab. That thought settled her heart rate a tick or two. She didn't want that yet. I'm not sure if the thing she doesn't want is Yanni back in the lab or her heart rate going down a tick or two. Could go either way. And she thought about what he was doing. He'd been meeting with Corain, of all people. Corain didn't meet with science. So, she said, and citizens voted for it. Jobs, Yanni said. A lot of jobs. Council knows what it's for. We're just not advertising it for the media yet. They know, and they voted for this. Everybody but Internal Affairs and State. 2 nays. I'm sure you know. She knew. Corain had gone along. Jobs, Yanni said. Jobs at Fargon. Elder Ari had warned her about unrest in the population, the Citizens Bureau, which Corain represented. Ari had warned her about unhappiness. At Fargon, at Panpari, which wasn't on the expansion routes, both flashpoints. Jobs had been scarce, opportunities scant since the war. Fargon was supposed to be in for major expansion when the military had planned to go ahead with Eversnow. She knew that was the history of it at that star. And then peace had happened, and the project had stalled. People elsewhere hadn't thought terraforming anything was a good idea, and then the first Ari had died, and it had stayed a dead issue for 20 years. But the Eversnow collapse had had an effect, politically. Fargon Station's independence tilt, voting sometimes with the expansionists, sometimes with the centrists, and bargaining hard for its vote, had been a factor in the defense election that had put Vladislav Khalid in, her least favorite bureau head in her own lifetime. And that unrest, of people feeling trapped and dead-ended, was still out there at Fargon and Pan-Paris, in the electorate of citizens, in defense. It spread even through the Science Bureau, out there. The expansionists had just squeaked through its traditional majority in the last election science had had. That was dangerous, even if it was just one star station. She had an inkling all of a sudden where Yanni was leading with this little surprise, and it wasn't stupid. It was an answer to the kind of problems Yanni had faced in his tenure as proxy counselor for science and head of the expansionist party. Give Fargon a major project, jobs, prosperity, and mutate Fargon's maverick electorate into one more in line with Rezun, who'd be running the project, setting a whole new population burst of Azi out there who would, over time, migrate to freedman status at Fargon and then, supposedly, at Eversnow Station, Azi who'd teach their own CIT children their opinions. And Corain was going along with it? She felt her week-long mad cool off just a degree. Defense still had a strong interest in Eversnow. It was going to be a problem to pry their fingers off it, and Yanni was trying to work with them. Had Yanni thought of that? "We set up an alpha-capable lab at Fargon," Yanni was saying quietly, and she began to track it, "but the locals are naturally immediately thinking of CIT use, ordinary CIT births, and that's what they know. Corain hasn't mentioned Eversnow in his own arguments, or at least it hadn't leaked by this morning. But Council has something to gain from this bill. Fargon's going to be the stepping-off point for Eversnow, which will become more and more economically important to Fargon voters and to the Citizens Bureau. But most of all, to us. Not just a new city, a new planet. For us, a whole new genetic resource, a whole new population to birth and set up. Corain's agreed to cooperate with us on the Hinder Stars Defense Treaty, but we agreed to drop the remediation funding increase for this session, for this project. Seed money. Corain gains jobs and votes, and he gets funding without a tax increase. But ultimately, we gain everything." The damned thing was an appalling daisy chain of favors exchanged. She suddenly had a much wider window into the content of the mysterious meetings, and here was Yanni. Stolid, just the facts Yanni, non-activist through her whole life, advancing an outrageously ambitious expansionist agenda the first Ari had contemplated and slowed down on toward the end of her life, as too much, too far. In Yanni's plan, they acquired not just Eversnow as a base, but the string of stars beyond it. That was the thing. The strand that had been, without Eversnow, unattainable. Defense wanted that. She could see it. And the centrists, particularly numerous in the Citizens Bureau, whose whole platform had always been to have Union's power to stay clustered tightly around Cytine, were suddenly going along with Eversnow? The first Ari had started out supporting terraforming at Cytine, her mother Olga's project, and then pulled the rug from under that once Rejuve manufacture became a vital industry. The centrists, wanting to expand population, not territory, had been outraged. They'd seen it as a ploy to keep Cytine mostly desert, carved up into administrative territories, notably Rezun's protective reserves, where CITs couldn't get a foothold. They'd been furious and called Eversnow a pie-in-the-sky piece of politics that was going to give Rezun one more protectorate and never would benefit the average CIT. Delicious alliteration there, partly because it had pie in it, and pie can be delicious. Possibly even a quiche. That's not Capone. Man, now I'm hungry. Where were we? Right. And now the centrists, who had been so fundamentally opposed to that project at the edge of space, were suddenly willing to give up their campaign to terraform Cytine and concentrate on Eversnow. The universe had changed in a week. And she didn't know enough. Eversnow had been a problem she'd planned to postpone for decades. A world locked in a snowball effect. A world without a spring for millions of years, with, however, the strong likelihood that there was still life there, genetically unique, locked in rocks in the sub-basement of a frozen ocean. In the first Ari's day, with all of humankind busy blowing each other up in the war, the expansionists and the military had both been hot to cede Eversnow for their own reasons, their hedge on a bet if the Alliance had hit Cytine. But centrists hadn't wanted to spend money there at all, and a few centrist-leaning scientists had argued they needed to preserve and study that world for a few decades. Too late by then. An early Defense Bureau project had already broken the freeze, or begun to break it, artificially, with solar heat, and tipped the balance toward a melt. How that had ever turned out, she didn't know in any detail. Earth-origin phytoplankton reportedly bloomed in certain areas, thanks to defense. She would not have done that. She would have said a vehement no. It was a living world, and living worlds were precious in the cosmos. Even snowballs. That was what she'd thought in her slight reading of the project. Good they gave it up. But now came politics. And Yanni was getting friendly with Corraine, establishing a population burst out at Fargon and then at Eversnow, where the centrists weren't paying attention. That actually could be smart, she had to admit it. Centrists attracted the violent fringe elements, people like the Paxers and the abolitionists, whose major agenda had gone from a unilateral peace with the company in the company wars on the one hand, and an abolition of all Azzy production on the other. The Paxers and the abolitionists had, as a curious side agenda, the terraforming of Cytine, which they thought would break the power of Regenesis, and that was how those fringe groups had found an ideological home in the centrist party. But let Corraine of Citizen shift the political focus to jobs for Fargon and snuggle up to science, and watch the fringe elements scramble to cope with that. In the first Ari had created her, she'd said, to keep watch over her projects, among which was Gehenna, and maybe, yes, she supposed, that could include Eversnow, even if it wasn't, like Gehenna, populated. So, well, maybe Yanni didn't deserve spacing. A sudden expansion of Regenesis interests out on the fringe of human space, a whole new strand of stars, new frontiers, a commitment to expansion, and to expansionism with a capital E, with all it stood for, and all the dangers in the deep unknown. Was she ready to open that door to the universe and deal with whatever lay out there? Was she, for that matter, going to be as expansionist in her own career as her predecessor had been? She didn't know. Decisions were coming down on her too early, and she was about to be stuck with this one. There were ways for her to undo everything except the dispersal of the Earth genome into an alien living world. But Defense, by all reports, had already done that part, even including higher life forms. I'm not sure, Yanni. I'm still not sure. Tell me why. A planet with only microbes to recommend it is interesting, but... oh, that's not a comma. A planet with only microbes to recommend it is interesting, but we have samples. All right, keep going. Why now? Yanni took a sip of wine. Here's the urgency in it. The war's over. That used to be our cohesive factor as a nation. We had to stop the Earth Company. So, now Union's teetering somewhere between an amalgam of star stations and a fully formed state, and there's power to be had. Power Regenesis holds virtually solo. Regenesis keeps Union going in a specific direction, keeps a momentum, or God knows what it would do. The Council may govern, but Regenesis still makes the rules that govern Azzy, and Azzy are still, and for a few centuries more, the source of the population base. That's supposed to end. Not yet. And this is the reason. As long as we expand into new frontiers, CIT births won't keep up with the need for population. Azi go on being born, and Rezun goes on making the rules. The newest population goes on voting our way, and we'll always outvote the centrists and keep them from clustering all our assets around one vulnerable planet. Plus, we retain our police power, where Azi are concerned, and we remain a clearinghouse for information that most of the citizenry doesn't even want to know, but which could come back on their heads. We don't know what the future holds, but it's a sure bet the centrists know less than we do. Earth is out of serious play in human politics for at least a century. It can't even get its consensus together to manage its trade relations, and right now they see us as an endless source of funds and invention, so they don't actually have to solve any of their problems. They sell us their antiques, their artwork, their unique biologicals, and we make the worst of their politicians drunk with money and importance. The only thing they really badly want, we won't sell them. That, of course, was Rejuve. On a populous planet like Earth, it could be a disaster. And she saw Yanni's point. Left with nobody to make a decision not to trade in it, it would have happened, and Earth would have collapsed. "Earth won't move until it's uncomfortable," she murmured, quoting. The rest of what RE1 had said was, "It won't make any decision until at least 3 of its factions combine." So where do you see things going for us all? Another war? Alliance has its own problems, transitioning from a collection of merchant captains to a government making law for 2 worlds. It set Pell off limits. It saw Gehenna as a potential resource, but now they know it's a time bomb. So they came out of the war owning 2 planets they don't want to touch. Partly noble ethics. But this is the important part. Partly, it's the paralysis of not having a Rezun labs to make informed decisions, and they refuse to ask us what to do with Gehenna or Pell. Their R&D was always driven by the likes of Lucas Corp's operation, all profit, no long-range planning, ecological disaster in the making. Plus, their 2 planets both have higher life to worry about. Our 2 worlds don't. Right now, they can't do anything about what we do. "But," she said, "Cytene's biosystem produces Rejuve, and we can't jeopardize that by terraforming here. Go over strictly to lab production and it drives up the cost of something everybody has to have for most of their life. So you create a class who can live for a century and a half being young, and separate them from the people who can't afford it." Staff brought the next course, grilled fish with citrus. It took a moment, and she was annoyed with Staff, who should have waited for a signal. Probably the fish would have seriously overcooked. But she needed a stern talk with Staff about interrupting. A very stern talk. "So," she said, after the obligatory compliments and several bites further on. "So," Yanni said, perfectly composed. "So I'm following everything you're saying, and it makes sense. But why are you personally voting for terraforming Eversnow this fast? What if there's something as important as Rejuve down there? Something we can't make in a lab?" "One reason. Rezun's continued existence, its power to make decisions, above board or in secret, is the core of all Union stability. Without us, Union falls apart. That's not arrogance. That's fact. Right now, Union isn't populous enough to avoid fragmentation. Decisions are being taken. Some really stupid ideas are current in politics, and some damned selfish ones. Rezun is at a low ebb of power during my interregnum, so it's perceived. Because I'm not an Emery, a Carnath, or a Nye. Not even a Warrick. I'm an unknown, and it's widely perceived I'm merely a footnote, filling time between Dennis Nye's control of Rezun and your taking the office, for which all the centrists are busy bracing themselves. They perceive me as weak, someone they can get concessions out of, before you come in. But on this one matter, on this, I am passionate. We need the expansion of human space to go on holding the power to make decisions. We need labs to extend our reach to other places. Labs, incidentally, out of immediate view of centrist leadership here on Cytine. But I'm not advertising that feature of the plan. We may still find biologicals we can develop at Eversnow, and the experience will be valuable. But right now, and in the immediate future, we need the expansion of our loyal voting base before some short-sighted, over-content business interests on Cytine Station and in Novgorod break up Razun and let us fall behind the Alliance. Fatally so. In which case, I guarantee you there'll be another war. We need to hedge our bets by spreading outward. Concerns for microbes take second place. The way Earth is managing its affairs currently, we may be using your predecessor's genetic arcs to recover what they lose. And what if we lose something like Rejuve because we rushed in and messed up a place we don't wholly know? We could lose something, yes, but we don't know what we gain. Oh, we could lose something, yes, but we know what we gain. A power base. And whatever we mess up there, it won't be us. The centrists envision a planet they can live on in billions, like Earth, the great fantasy. They see this project as a foot in the door of that science. We get the centrists involved far outside the understanding of their comfortable power base on Cytine, and we edge their children closer and closer to our point of view. The long view. In this case, from a standpoint of distance from the center of union. We get their kids involved in this project. We turn the centrists into our asset. They go for the profit out there, being people with families they want to support, and we go on as we are, controlling colonization. There are other worlds beyond Eversnow, but we can't reach them without stepping stones. Trade drives expansion. Trade drives us. And the Treaty of Pell meant our trade pays a price. It may have meant peace, but Alliance is getting fatter on a share of our trade. And some of those merchanters are using the profit to update armaments, the way some of our warships nowadays run a little cargo of a medical and emergency nature. The treaty may someday break down on that point. We have to get other options. We have to maintain our economic push that keeps us stronger than the Alliance, or see the consequences. I just looked at my chat, and there is, of course, a robot being banished to cyber hell. It wasn't a stupid idea. She could see that. And it was a vision. It might be stupid to think expansionism could go on at the same pace forever, but there was something to it going on for a while. Earth was one planet, one star system, and fragile. Earth had antagonized all its colonies, who held the only safe direction for Earth to expand. Earth now knew it wasn't going to grow without running into intelligence in the other directions, and they only hoped Earth didn't provoke something out in the deep. Alliance was already committed in the direction of Gehenna, but that planet was a problem. Eversnow would lead Union development further out on another tangent, away from Earth and farther out than the Alliance, down a strand of stars that worked like a river in space. Broaden Union's population base, widen their territory, make them secure, and yes, make sure there were jobs. That had been a poser, but Yanni's plan solved that at a stroke. Going away from Alliance made them unassailable militarily. Defense would like that. Folly for Alliance or Earth to attack something that much bigger, and a strong Union with other resources wouldn't actually need Earth or even Alliance, while a strong Union was a big market for Earth and for Alliance. So it could possibly preserve the peace better than standing still. So was it worth ruining a planet? A snowball? The domain of microbes? It might be. So let me ask you one, Yanni said. This new research post upriver, it seems your own plan's gotten beyond that, while I've been in Novgorod. Now we're talking about a major lab expansion. 500 jobs on this budget request, my office tells me. Requests for extension, and I can't flip a page on use of the excavators. There's nothing there to mine up in the hills. No industry likely. But now you're requesting residences. A river port with cofferdam and shields. Why do you need a river port for remediation research? To move supply. And? It's seeming a little beyond a bare-bones research post all of a sudden. I'm not complaining, understand? I just want to know what we're suddenly funding up there. What are you up to, young lady? She really hadn't been ready to talk about that. But maybe it was time. Secret for secret. Actually, a township. An adjunct to Resume? Or a rival? A real township. Like here. Shops, people, manufacture eventually. I'm thinking of calling it Strassenberg. Strassenberg, Yanni said, sitting back a little. That had been my mom's name, Strassen. Well, now there's an ambitious design for an 18-year-old. You're building a new wing on Resume, and in the last 3 weeks your research lab has mutated into a town. And why, pray, do you think we need another township in the world? That, like her question about Yanni's programs, was a deeper question. Fair question, considering the funds she'd counted on weren't going to be plentiful if they now had to fund the remediation. 2 reasons. First, the isolation, what I said at the start. A place to put the rest of my uncle's staff where I don't have to deal with them. But I want a lab for my decisions. The first Ari created me to carry on her work. I'm setting up a place where absolutely all the decisions are mine, and all the mindsets are what I choose to be up there, CIT and ASI. Give or take my uncle's people, that they'll have to encapsulate, they're my research question. I said it was a lab, and it actually is. It's my comparison to what the first Ari did in, say, Gehenna. Eyebrows lifted. Clearly, a city wasn't quite the antsy Yanner. Eyebrows lifted. Clearly, a city wasn't quite the answer Yanni had expected under the title of a research lab. But it was the truth. There might be a time bomb in the Gehenna mindset, but a more closely held secret, and one she wasn't sure the first Ari had ever directly discussed with Yanni. There was possibly one in the Cytine population itself, simply because the mindsets were what they were, exactly the same mix of psych sets Yanni had been talking about continuing at Eversnow. All but the CITs who'd come down from orbit where Resume designed mindsets, the same as Yanni planned to go on using out at Eversnow. The station over their heads had its founding families, a certain aristocracy of CITs, people with citizen numbers from the origin of the system. Okay, I get it. I'm just gonna hop, skip, dance, and seizure my way through these sentences. All right. All but the CITs who'd come down from orbit were Resume-designed mindsets, the same as Yanni planned to go on using at Eversnow. The station over their heads had its founding families, a certain aristocracy of CITs, people with citizen numbers from the origin of the system, the Carnaths, the Nyes, the Emerys, and the Schwartzes, plus a couple of hundred other names that had proliferated through the station, and then a number had settled at Resume and Novgorod, on the planetary surface, once they'd begun to colonize the planet. But it had needed a succession of population bursts to build civilization and sustain an economy independent of Earth's economy, independent of the mercanter alliances. Independent of the Merchanters' Alliance, from which they had seceded by force of arms. A planetary economy needed hands to work, minds to devise, and people to mine resources, consume products, and fill the vacant spots in the outback, dense enough population for viable commerce. In the early days, Union had boosted its numbers by birth labs, by cycling ASI into freedmen at an extraordinary rate. ASI who'd been given their ethics by tape that Resume had created in the first Ari's mother's time. And the first Ari had had a very heavy hand on that process, tweaking what her mother, Olga Emery, had done. And then those Azi had become freedmen, and married and had CIT kids, and taught them their values. More, the first Ari had operated increasingly with deep sets, in a style that scared a lot of other psych designers, and they didn't read what she'd been doing. Better. Teaching the kids' generation to carry on, that was what. Just like Gehenna. A lab-made ethic was threaded all through the stations in Union's grasp, just exactly what Yanni intended continuing with another surge in Azi population in the deep beyond. The same ethic the first Ari-generated population burst had installed was buried in the psyches of all those people who took the subways to work and voted in the massive bureaus of citizens and technology. Educated votes counted multiple times, and there were devices in the way the vote... I can't flip this page fast enough. And there were devices in the way the vote happened to keep the decision-making within a bureau constantly in the hands of people expert in the fields in question. But the fact was, in Union's system, the popular vote, moving in a unified direction, could swing a certain way no matter what the experts wanted. Count on it. The Azi-born were never going to turn on Reziun. The sons and daughters of the Azi-born were never going to turn, no matter what the centrists wanted, or the expansionists wanted, or the Paxers wanted. Yanni's maneuvers to divide and diminish the centrists were, she suspected, all unnecessary, if the first Ari was right. There was a worm working in the programs, something that moved and reprogrammed itself to suit the times, and it was damned scary how it worked, and changed, while Azi Descended were now outpopulating CITs. But it was not something she was going to discuss in depth with Yanni. The terrible danger of that ethics implant was what the first Ari had died knowing. She died haunted by the fact that one human couldn't live long enough to see what it was going to do. It was why an Ari 2 had to exist, to watch out for glitches in the mindsets she'd installed, at Gehenna, on Cytine, inside Reziun itself. It was necessarily an untried theory in those population surges mandated by the war, decommissioned soldiers, workers, colonists in the Gehenna outback. The first Ari had had to adjust them fast and do it wide, or see it undone and unraveling. A collective Azi-descended socio-set could mutate under unforeseen circumstances, creating not just new attitudes, but a whole artificially settled human population, and integration with a capital I. That's actually how it's written. I'm not inserting that it has a capital I. It's literally, the text literally says that. The first Ari had not just tweaked the helm of the ship of colonial ambitions, but rewritten the navigational charts. Gehenna was only a part of it. And her predecessor had kept that secret to herself until she passed it to her own image and set her onto a very specific course, to be sure the design didn't blow up in the second and third generation of newly minted CITs. Because to tell anyone was risking letting another worm loose in the population, one of knowing one's fate and trying to second-guess it. And where was the end? What was going to happen to humanity as a whole when half the human population in the universe was on a different, human-devised program? Done was done. She had to steer it. "All right," she said to this man, her own caretaker, her protector. Oh, that's a period, not a comma. "All right," she said to this man, her own caretaker, her protector. The man likely empowered by her predecessor to remove her if she ran amok. And she forgave him his sins of secrecy and surrendered a planet to him, because this man, whose use was his independent thinking, thought it was a necessary move. "All right, Yanni, so I'll study up on Eversnow. I should have done Okay. All right, Yanni, so I'll study up on Eversnow. I should have done before now. The damage, you're right, is already done. The military saw to that. And I'm sure there are benefits I haven't looked at." "I have a paper for you on that matter," he said. "Whale song on Earth. Whale song, she said. The whim of a nostalgic preservationist. The oceans of Eversnow. They sing. I think you'll find it interesting. A bite of fish. You give me my city, Yanni, and I'll give you your planet. Precocious child. On a completely different topic, I've almost made up my mind this week. I'm pretty sure we're going to clone Dennis. Are we? Now? Or sometime in the next 7 years? She frowned. That was a question. A big one. How close will we try to stick to program? Gerard is the one we're going to trust. A little. Without his brother Dennis to protect, how do we make a Gerard? So we clone Dennis for him. So we clone Dennis for him, so Gerard keeps on track. That's my total reasoning in deciding. I was all set to tell you that this evening, when you dropped this Eversnow business in my lap. You said you were leaving, the decision up to me. Oh my gosh, I thought there was a comma there. What on God's green earth? You said you were leaving the decision to me. You said you were leaving the decision up to me, and I was thinking about it a lot while you were gone. Dennis has no essential value, Yanni paraphrased her, except to keep Gerard on track. No, that's what I changed my mind on. Dennis helped create me. And if you have to create me again, you'd probably want a Dennis to keep the new me in line, because Gerard is too soft. You don't think I could fill that position? Uncle Yanni, she said fondly, you're much too easy on me. You let me get away with everything. Hell, sounds as if you're already making a lot of minor decisions, especially when I'm out of the house. Except the Eversnow thing, I wouldn't call that minor. It'll be your problem, young lady. It'll be your problem until it's pretty well underway. You're staying in office at least 2 more years, maybe more. 2 more years in purgatory. God, I hate politics. But please don't fall down the stairs, Uncle Yanni. You have to be the director. My alternative right now is Justin or Jordan. It was a joke. Yanni didn't laugh. Better to install Grant, Yanni muttered. Probably true. Justin Warrick would hate the job more than Yanni did. Sacrifice the situation Yanni was enduring. What the hell? I don't know why my brain is doing this. Or my mouth. I blame me. Probably true. Justin Warrick would hate the job more than Yanni did. Sacrifice was the situation Yanni was enduring. Never mind he was creating a planet. He wanted to be working with Azzy, which was what he really loved. Yanni, could you do one more thing for me? One thing more for me? What? Yanni asked, and an eyebrow lifted. When you take that tone, I'm on my guard. She thought. Ari wanted you to bring me up. She'd agree with me. But she wasn't supposed to know that, so she said, but she wasn't, she wasn't, well. Oh. Yes. She's not supposed to know that because that's information she gleaned from documents that were Yanni's documents. Right. Communiques with Yanni. Right. She thought, Ari wanted you to bring me up. She'd agree with me. But she wasn't supposed to know that, so she said, Gerard's going to need a father in a few months. Would you? Good God. You'd be good at it. Like hell. Gerard? Good loving God. He'd turn out a serial killer. I'm not good with kids, especially that one. You're good at politics. People promise you things. I'm not sure that compliments my intelligence. So will you do it? A sigh. I'm already loaded down with council work and admin. Where do I find the hours? Who else am I going to get? Dr. Edwards? Gerard's too devious for him. You're serious? I'm completely serious. Well, it's my appointment to make, Yanni said, unless you want to take over this week. No. So I'll think about it. Seriously? Seriously. So tell me about the rest of the session, she said. I'm sure you were brilliant. The rest, he said, was absolutely deadly dull. Well, except the bomb scare. Paxers up to their old tricks. Nobody believed they could have gotten anything into the building, but I went back to the hotel and actually got my correspondence done. Dinner wended happily on to dessert, a chocolate mousse, just a little of it, with a lot less tension. She found herself happy. So happy from relief that her hands shook a little, and she was fluxed. She'd just lost a planet, for God's sake, and she found herself being grateful it wasn't anything that personally threatened her. As for Yanni, he didn't look at all guilty of double-dealing. He looked very tired by then, trying to be sharp, but considering the trip home, the wine, and the rich dessert, he was probably thinking of bed and really hoping she wouldn't try any working at the moment. She didn't. She had all of her dessert and said she was tired herself, and yawned. That was no pretense, and no working. "You're the one who's had the long trip," she said, "and look, I'm the one yawning." "I'm done," he said. "I've got a detailed report for you. I wrote down all the details. Session vids, dull stuff." He fished in his pocket and laid a capsule down. "All there." "You're so good," she said warmly, and meant it, this time in gratitude. Even if she was relatively sure the secret meetings wouldn't be in there. She pushed back from the table, and Yanni got up and moved her chair for her, gentlemanlike. "Uncle Yanni." "Don't call me Uncle." "Grump." She'd found that word in a book recently. It fit Yanni. She put her hands on his shoulders and kissed him on the cheek. "Good night. Go get some rest." He returned the kiss, casual, but it made a warm feeling. There was no other CIT who had done that, not since Mama had gone away. Uncle Dennis certainly hadn't. And she had lately to think, did he dare try to manipulate her, sweeten his Eversnow maneuver, which he had come here knowing wouldn't be totally to her liking? But she didn't want to think that. And he had brought her a written report and the session tapes. She just filed the feeling away. Let it go for a while. There'd be changes. There'd be her administration after his, but it didn't have to be yet. It didn't have to be yet. He was doing all right. She didn't like the Eversnow thing, didn't like the new labs either, but he was being careful about it. She saw him to the door, his companion Frank joining him there, and Catelyn showed up too. Yanni left. The door closed. Systems went up again. "I think he's all right," she announced to Catelyn when that door shut. There was no surprise there, just a nod of agreement. Her security had likely monitored the whole conversation. On the whole, the business with Yanni had gone amazingly well. Tonight, maybe it was the sheer relief of getting Yanni back, even if she had to bargain a bit of her soul for him, she finally felt as if she could get some sleep. Book 1, Section 1, Chapter 10. April 25, 2424, 1901 hours. Fancy restaurant. Columns of light and coherent fog with a rhythmic sea sound in the background, and a holographic beach shimmering in mirrors that reflected, by some optical trick, the diners, but not the columns. It was a place called Jamaica. Justin hadn't been here before, and whatever stipend his father was on, it didn't, he was relatively sure, provide for a place like this. Jordan had called up after a silence of several days, had asked him and Grant to dinner in the apartment. He'd balked, not wanting a renewal of the argument. He'd suggested a quiet dinner out. Jordan had said he'd call back. And did, with a reservation. Here. Jamaica lay on the main level of admin. That should have warned Jordan about the cost. It lay a short walk from both Education and Wing 1. An outdoor walk across the quadrangle or a protected one through the tunnels. Probably his father had seen the convenience, hadn't likely seen the menu. And the late hour? Because, Jordan had said, it was booked to the hilt at prime hours, which must mean the food was good. It meant other things, too. That it was one of those admin watering holes, and Jordan was 2 decades out of touch with the changes in admin. It had gotten pricier, to say the least. Jordan likely had no idea what he'd booked them into. "Nice place," Grant observed. "Are you sure you said Jamaica?"
"He's not going to pay for this," Justin said. "Make sure the bill comes to us, will you? I'll keep on the lookout."
Grant immediately took charge and inquired with the maitre d' near the desk. There was a quiet conversation, a nod, a credit chit passed, a little bow. The maitre d' moved a little closer to where Justin stood and offered them immediate seating. Jordan hadn't arrived yet. Or a seat at the bar if they wanted to wait for their party. But in that same moment, Jordan showed up with Paul and claimed both of them and the reservation. There we go. Jordan looked quite professorial, yes. Jordan looked quite professorial tonight in a tweed coat, quiet brown, a little academic for the milieu. Justin wore green, mild sheen, fashionable among the youngish set, which did fit in here. The maitre d' escorted them to their table, saw them seated, and promised them a waiter named Edward. "Well, and how are you?" Jordan asked, as they settled in at their table, 2 and 2, serving assistants deftly maneuvering their china, filling water glasses.
"Oh, fine,"
Justin said, and the drink waiter showed up extraordinarily quickly for a place like this, crammed as it was with diners. It might be that someone had recognized Grant, whose red hair and vid-star looks made him easy to ID. In Grant's company, people he had never met knew him, in every corner in Rezion. But it was Jordan Warrick's name on the reservation, so it was very possible it wasn't Grant that had gotten the fast attention. Very possibly it was Rezion security that had picked their table for them and bugged it. That might get the maitre d's quick attention, too, not to have a foul-up with security reach the ears of the other patrons. Menus were set in their hands, bound in leather, quite the extravagance, while they eyed each other intermittently like fencers and didn't quite succeed at small talk. There were no prices on the menu. Not one. And Jordan by now knew what they were into, but he hadn't said a thing. "Did you come across the quadrangle?" Paul asked. Grant nodded. "Nice evening." "So did we." Jordan played the host, scanned the menu, inquired about appetizers, signaling that they were going to go the whole route. They settled on the pâté, and didn't say a thing about his line of credit. He was animated, pleasant, cheerful. Jordan's public face, the face Justin had wanted to engage for this first phase of peacemaking. Jordan's card wasn't going to bounce if the maitre d' failed them, and that wouldn't help the peace. Justin could foresee the moment, the embarrassment. Jordan's card was going to bounce if the maitre d' failed them, and that wouldn't help the peace. Justin could foresee the moment, the embarrassment. God, the bill had better come to him, quietly, tactfully. He and Jordan could patch things up. They'd not fought since he'd grown. They didn't know each other, that was the sad truth. 20 years of separation from Jordan was a significant time, even in rejuved lives. Jordan had dealt with him in the interim, corresponded with him, not lived in reach of him, that was the problem, and they had to learn about each other all over again. They'd been through the tentative, polite period. A few days ago, they'd finally gotten down to honest opinions, and somehow, expert as he was in psych, it had just slid inexorably downward. Which it wouldn't do here. Jordan knew how to play to a crowd. He wasn't going to embarrass himself, even if he was likely to try another tag-your-it attack. It would be subtle, if it came, reserved. Unless something really, really jolted him, and they weren't going to mention the name Ari tonight. If Jordan did, he'd stop it cold.
He'd stayed away from the past with Jordan these last weeks. He'd broken the rule, pulled the scab off old wounds in their last alcohol-fueled debate, and maybe he had to go on avoiding the topic until Jordan did get his license and his security clearance back and had a few months of behaving himself. Or maybe they never would be able to discuss that particular subject, Ari, and the night that had changed him. Terrible as the experience had been, long before the argument with Jordan, he'd come to wonder if the first Ari's action hadn't been a rescue. Jordan's path wasn't really right. What? I skipped a line. Jordan's path wasn't really what he wanted. He'd been set on being Jordan until that night. That night, he'd become somebody else. He wasn't sure who, but he'd become different. Thank God. Or he'd have agreed with Jordan 4 nights ago and they'd all lose their licenses. This way. "Ever eaten here?" Jordan asked him over the menu. "No," Justin said. "Never have." And the real question. "You haven't?"
"Random choice. A yen for something different."
And still, typical Jordan, not a mention of the absent prices. He'd heard the night's specials and not asked. He maintained a pleasant expression on his face. Also pure Jordan.
Planis was a lot of the same thing."
Play along. Change the subject. Keep it light. Not many choices there, I'll imagine.
5. It got boring the first month. There were actually 6 choices when I got there. 2 of the restaurants consolidated. One changed the menu, about 5 years on. The other one never did. 1 Greek, 1 Italian, 1 French, 1 colonial, and 1 you couldn't depend on. That was the excitement. That was our suspense, that 5th restaurant.
It might be humor. Every piece of humor he'd heard from Jordan lately had had a bitter edge. But he dutifully laughed, trying to take it lighter. "Remember Illusions? It's been through most of those choices. Now it's New Era."
"I'm afraid I've missed that delight so far."
"A lot of expensive spices. The real thing, I understand. Imported. Some of them are pretty good. Some of them I'm not so sure about. But the steaks are consistently good."
"We'll have to try it. Anything new."
"We can do that." Justin, meanwhile, looked through the menu. "Angry shrimp and Pelle Bordeaux," he said. Pelle Bordeaux wasn't going to be cheap. "Sounds interesting. I think I'll do that."
"Adventurous," Jordan said, and added, darkly, "You must be rich."
"Well, I secretly thought I'd treat my father."
"I didn't ask you here to soak my son for the tab."
"Let me pay it. Let me do it. It's my pleasure."
"They pay you pretty well for what you do."
"I've been where you are. It ends. You'll get back. All the way back. You'll be treating me." Fast change of subject. A cheerier one. "How's it coming with the sets you did? Your own ones that you were looking at? How they've developed over 2-3 decades? That's got to be interesting."
"Getting back into it, at least. I'd need an office."
"Yanni might be agreeable."
"You're rattling around in our old one."
"We have staff," Justin said. His guard was instantly up. God, he hated to be so paranoid, and he didn't want to show it in his expression. But talking to Jordan lately was like walking through broken glass barefoot. Barefoot.
"Nice location, convenient, and there's room enough."
Guard went way up. "Not with staff. Sorry, Jordan, that won't work."
"Paul and I haven't gotten all our Planis notes pried out of security," Jordan said glumly. "Our wardrobes barely made it through. You can see our splendor this evening. Pretty shabby stuff."
"You're fine."
"Don't suppose you can use your influence with the little darling to speed our stuff along?"
"I'll ask, if you like." He was glad the little darling was as far as the sarcasm about young Ari went in this venue. The walls had ears, and even if they didn't, he didn't like Jordan dragging him into a proxy quarrel with admin while half the wing directors and agency heads in Razun sat at the other tables. "Be genteel. Trust me. This time, trust me and take my word for it. She's not her gene mother."
"No?" Jordan feigned surprise. "After all they've done to be sure she is?"
The waiter arrived. Mercifully. The dinner wasn't going well, and they hadn't even ordered yet. Justin gave his order. Grant ordered smoked salmon, a likely match for cost. Paul ordered a bœuf à la maison, and Jordan ordered a modest, all-local Caesar salad with blackened chicken.
Saving room for dessert, Jordan said when Justin frowned at his economy. I noticed a cheesecake.
Sounds good, Justin said, not tempted to believe Jordan was through with gestures this evening. No, not once he'd started. And the waiter departed.
So I'm going to impose on you, Jordan said. We need desk space. I'm sure they watch me. I'm sure they watch you. We can consolidate their job. Make them happy.
I'm telling you, we have staff. 5 staffers and us in that office. And security won't let you in there.
So who's important? Your clericals or your father?
I'm saying we need the staff. They have work to do.
Fine. Ask the little dear for space for them. I'm sure she'd find it. After all, she's not stingy like her predecessor.
Jordan, give it up. You haven't got your clearance. You'll get it. But it's still no on the office.
I'm saying I'm going E.T. locked into that living room. I can't work in there. Put your spare clericals into our living room if you have to. You're not even there 5 days a week. Who's using the desks?
It wasn't an outrageous request, except it was his convenient integrations computer access, which his staff used, which he used, damn it, for Ari's lessons, and his father didn't have clearance or a license. His safe was there. His manuals were there. His projects were there. He didn't keep those in their cubbyhole of a Wing 1 office.
You're not happy, Jordan said. Sorry.
Look, if you want your office back... Yanni wasn't likely to approve Jordan's moving into general office space in the first place, there was that. But he could easier get another office in the education wing for them and their staff.
I would like that. Yes, I mean when I get the license back, for God's sake. We can share. What happened to us working together?
And his and Grant's work with the G-27, while not under security seal, had some bits in it he felt fairly proprietary about. And no, damn it, he didn't want another round of security investigations going through his notebooks, or Grant's, because Jordan was in there. More to the point, he didn't want his father going through his notes and appropriating anything he was working on. No way in hell.
I just don't see why it's an issue, Jordan said with a wistful little frown. Apply to move your staff out. I'm sure they'll find a space somewhere.
It's a little matter of convenience.
You sure? You know there are virtual connections, same as being there. Unless, of course, there's some reason you'd rather not.
You know the reasons I'm a little reluctant. Last Sunday night was a case in point.
Many fewer drinks in the office.
Listen, Jordan, my life is going perfectly fine. So could yours be, if you just put the brakes on a bit and get along with Yanni. You're home, for God's sake. He knows you didn't... Whatever.
Yanni's a prick.
Dad, don't.
Have you caved in that far?
He lowered his voice way down and leaned across the table. And do you have to agitate admin just to get a reaction? I don't particularly want a reaction, thank you.
So the little dear is something like her predecessor. So the little dear is something like her predecessor.
Not sotto voce. Just normal conversation level, and not cooperating worth a damn. Justin found his pulse rate had gotten up, old familiar sensation. And he didn't like it. Well, there you have it, don't you? We're arguing again, and I don't think it would work, sharing an office. Look, I've had enough of investigations. I don't want to be in the middle of another one. And get off the notion it's Ari. It's Yanni, and you know you don't want to be in his bad book, but you persist in picking fights.
Ah, so it's fair for your reputation. But you should be golden. You were quite the hero, overthrowing the Nyes, saving Her Highness.
Neither. Jordan was stalking some point, he saw that, and he didn't know why or what. For a top-flight psych set designer, it was downright embarrassing not to know what was behind his own identical's actions, and that hinted at a working, either verbal or otherwise. Jordan knew him from way back, owned most of the buttons, knew his body from the inside out, and that was a fact. Sitting here across the table from Jordan, mirror into mirror with that damned infuriating smile on Jordan's face that his own body knew gut deep was no smile at all because it never reached the eyes. Damn, he knew it. And there was nobody more dangerous to him if Jordan decided to pull old strings. Set psych switches in his own baby boy? Damned right Jordan would have done that from the cradle up. RE1 had flipped them the other way. Jordan had had 20 years to figure out how to get at him past Ari's working, or worse. And then those questions Sunday night. Had he been alone with Ari? Had Ari done anything further? It very much assumed the character not of an outraged father, but of a psych operator wanting a case history. And much worse. Jordan knew how to get at Grant. Grant had been under Jordan's supervision, too, in their collective childhood, and if Jordan could get his hands on Grant's updated manual, which was in the computer system in that office, once Jordan got his license back. That thought sent cold chills through him. The very thought that Grant could be put into that situation, that sent his hand questing after the lately arrived drink. Share an office with Jordan? No. Absolutely not. License or no license. And subtlety only wound his own gut in knots. It gave Jordan chance after chance to get at him. Get to him, sorry. "It's just not going to work," he said. "I'll go to Yanni, if you can't do it without flaring off. I'll talk to him and see if I can get your stuff out of customs and your license hurried along."
"I don't want any damn charity."
"But you damn sure want my office, and I don't want you in there."
"Your office?"
"Let's try honesty," he said abruptly. "You want to start the war with admin up again. I don't. I don't want to subject Grant to it either. So make your own choices, but..."
"Are you making your choices these days?"
"My choice right now is to have my office to myself, to do my work outside politics."
"Oh, come now."
"To have Grant do his, to enjoy my life."
"Will you? Enjoy it? And are you outside politics?"
That did it. He smiled with his father's own false warmth right back at him, and something ticked over deep in his makeup that could be cold as ice. Something he didn't damn well trust, but right now it felt like an asset, not to have himself out of control with this man who had all the buttons. "I don't know, Dad. I haven't a clue who's had a go at me or who's reshaped my psyche during Dennis Nye's tenure. There are things I don't actually remember. But I'm actually pretty happy these days, and I lately find I haven't any stake in your game, whatever it is."
"You think you haven't?"
"I know I haven't. I don't give a damn for what happened 20 years ago, and if you plan to live here in Rezune, I really hope you'll just let it all go. So enjoy your dinner. I plan to."
Justin, you really believe you're not in it?"
"Won't work, Pop. Really won't work." He took a sip of wine. The rich tastes were sharp, solid, complex. Where Jordan wanted to lead him was complicated, too, the wrong end of Jordan's ambitions, whatever they currently were, and he discovered, since the last fight, he truly failed to give a damn tonight, and decided not to subscribe to Jordan's list of problems.
"You have your own agenda," Jordan said. "You think it's in your practical interest to keep your own counsel, and you don't want to share. I can respect that."
"Thanks for the analysis."
"You're waiting. You plan to have influence in the great someday. Yanni's not any younger, and she's not old enough, not as old as she needs to be. So you're going to be the stopgap, What kind of position will that put you into? You know, you could parlay your connections into the directorship. What time the little dear doesn't hold that post herself. Maybe counselor for science. And are you ready for that?
He took another drink of wine, a deliberately small one, thinking, God, no, and said, You're scared of her, but not scared enough. Watch it about trying to read me. You could make a mistake. You're locked in what was, and things just may not be the same after 20 years.
You think I can't read you down to the fine print? I do, believe me, I do, right down to the fact that you're running scared of the little dear, same as you did her predecessor. I know all the twitches.
I know you owned the gene set first, but gene sets are only part of the story. We both know that, don't we? But do we actually believe it? Do we both actually believe it? I wonder.
Oh, programming can do wonders, Jordan said, and you've been worked for all those years. How many sessions did you have with Gerard Nye's people before you had one with Lil'Ari?
Arrests, you mean? He kept his tone light. Oh, a few. But you were in one long detention yourself over on Planis. Did you find that makes a psychological difference? I'd say so. That actually caught Jordan just a little by surprise. Or maybe it stung for reasons he hadn't, until now, guessed.
So you won't like having me in your office, Jordan said. Flank attack and redirect. You don't trust me.
Living the life I've lived, I don't trust anybody. You think they did work you over when you were... You think they did work you over when you were arrested? Or aren't you sure of that?
Jordan avoided his eyes. In a psych master, that was a devastating flinch. And that avoidance hit him right in the heart, reminding him of his own little sojourns with interrogators. Ricochet, he thought, feeling the pain. Damn. And he didn't look at Paul. He hadn't invoked Paul's name or queried him. Paul wasn't looking at him. But the shots didn't go just at Jordan. Salads arrived. They ate while Jordan sat and had more wine. They managed small talk, catching up on who was sleeping with whom, who was married, who had procreated. One of the many Karnaths had given natural birth to a daughter, opting to skip the birth labs. It was the talk of the offices. Crazy, no few said. There's a certain merit in it, Jordan said. Think of all the thousands who don't have access to a lab, or don't have it government-subsidized. Fraggoth, Panbury, all those poor women doing it the hard way, those poor childless men with no other recourse. Justin didn't often imagine Fraggoth or Panbury, way stations in the dark which touched his personal world very little. He was glad not to have to imagine them, steel worlds orbiting stars whose planets, if any to speak of, were good only for mining. We're spoiled, I suppose. Spoiled as hell, Jordan said, more cheerfully, though there's Planis if you ever want not to be spoiled. Right back to the bitter edge. And it didn't pay to go there. Rather not. Hope never to. So how's your apartment? Nice, I'll imagine, being where it is. Nice, yes. Bugged, naturally. Naturally. Main course arrived. Gratefully. Another service of wine. Jordan took a refill. He didn't. Nor did Grant, nor Paul. Ever think of moving back to education? Jordan asked. I think about it. You could come and visit me, but I can't get into your restricted little paradise. I know. I'm sorry about that. I really am. Can't you do anything about it, can you? Can't do anything about it, can you? I know it's not going to last. Isn't it? Got a date when they're going to stop bugging my apartment? Got a date when I can go into my son's extravagant palace? You know I don't. Maybe, to a large extent, Dad. That depends on you. Right next door to the little princess. Convenient for sex. Is that what you do for your keep? He said nothing, speared a bite of his dinner, and ate it.
The spiced shrimp was curiously tasteless, and he resisted the impulse to lay his fork down and leave. Or have another wine. His pulse rate was up. Jordan always did that to him, and another wine would be deadly. He decided on a redirect, and had another bite of shrimp. "Paul?" "Sir?" "Sir, hell. I'm Justin. Remember?" Paul's face was generally somber. It remained that way. With good cause, tonight. "I remember." "Grant," Jordan said, and Justin felt his heart kick up another notch. He couldn't help it. And he resented that, resented Jordan having anything to do with Grant these days. "Are you taking good care of my boy? In every respect?" "No problem, sir." Grant's voice was perfectly light and smooth, not a twitch. "Thank you." "You came through all the troubles in good shape?" "Absolutely, sir." "Have you ever needed a supervisor beyond what you have?" "Damn it, Jordan, just enjoy your dinner." "I was just asking. Concerned." "Ah, hell." Grant's welfare and their relationship and the number of times Grant had needed a supervisor wasn't a topic he wanted opened up. The past wasn't. He didn't want to list the things that had changed in his relationship with Grant into a sexual one. He didn't want to list the things that had changed his relationship with Grant into a sexual one. He didn't want Jordan's commentary on their existence. They all ate in prickly silence for a space, except that Paul asked how long they should have to wait for library access, which seemed a fairly minor request. "I'm sure I don't know," Justin said patiently. "That's something you might legitimately ask Yanni." He couldn't stop himself from charitable impulses. "Or I can. I will." "One of 10,000 little nuisances," Jordan said. "I need my own past articles. I don't think I'm going to blow up the laboratories with information I'd find in my own damned articles, would I?" We do have an inquiry going in Yanni Schwartz's office," Paul said, "but that's had to wait for him to get back." "He's back now, this evening. Give him a day to get his feet on the ground. I'm sure he'll give you that access." "Well, I'm sure it's not a priority," Jordan said sourly and shoved his plate back. He'd mostly picked the chicken out of his salad and eaten a little of the green. In any respect. Excuse me.
"Oh no, my diaphragm. It rebelleth."
Let us try that again. "Well, I'm sure I'm not a priority," Jordan said sourly and shoved his plate back. He'd mostly picked the chicken out of his salad and eaten a little of the green. In any respect. Justin decided he was through. Grant was hardly eating. "Shall we order dessert?" "Out of the mood, thanks."
"Sorry."
"It's sad," Jordan said. "We were one mind once and long ago. Remember that? We were happy then."
"I remember you and Ari Emery got into a fight, and Grant and I ended up on the short end of it. I'm not looking for a replay, Dad. If you want to pick a fight with admin, just excuse me out of it this time."
"Why don't you come over for drinks after dinner?" Jordan asked. "Just a quiet family evening."
"Did that, thanks," Justin said. "Had enough to drink tonight as is, and so have we all. Late supper, and I'm going to bed. I've got a meeting in the morning."
"Oh?"
We're conferring on a psych set," Justin said.
"What stem?"
"Oh, out of the old Reza GLX3. "What?" "Oh, out of the old Reza GLX tree," Justin said, which actually was the truth, and he watched Jordan drink it in and jog a doubtless rusty memory, eyes momentarily innocent, mind working on a problem. That was the father he wanted back. If the conversation was going to change direction, he might change his mind on dessert.
"Worker set, isn't it?"
"There's a new lab upriver, or will be. It's quite a project. Research and light manufacture."
"And you're picking the sets that go there?"
"Can't discuss that one. Sorry."
He wasn't sure he should have said as much as he had, but it was common knowledge, and the answer he'd given did answer Jordan's question.
And how soon does this new enterprise arise from the wasteland?
Oh, a while yet. They've only built the bunker as is, for the first workers. Precepts are mostly built, but not online.
The little darling's precocious ambition? Or Yanni's?
Hers, as far as I know.
And only 18. What are we calling this installation?
I don't know.
What with Azzy all picked out for it? And what CIT population? Is this where she's sending all the dissidents?
It wasn't far off the mark, and Jordan Warrick could easily turn up on that list, but he didn't want it to happen, and he didn't let his expression change, knowing that was exactly what Jordan was implying. I haven't a clue about that.
Oh, come, you're consulting on the psych sets of the Azzy component, the things they're supposed to counter. You know damned well what CIT profile the Azzy will fit around, clear as a footprint.
Well, if I guessed, I'd be a fool to say, and you didn't sire a fool, Dad, so give it up.
And she thought of this all on her own.
You're assuming things I've never said. The waiter came, offering dessert. No thanks, Justin said. Just the bill.
Yes, sir, the waiter said, having gotten his instructions, it seemed. The waiter tapped his handheld and called up a bill. Thank God it was fast. Justin swept his keycard through the offered handheld and keyed a reasonable tip on monumental charge. He gave it to the waiter, kept a pleasant smile on his own face as he pushed the chair back, and maneuvered himself between Jordan and Grant as they all got up and walked out. "So where is this place?" Jordan asked as they passed between the columns on their way out. "The new construction."
Not that far upriver.
"Light manufacture? I just wonder what they'll be making up there that we don't have here, or mining there that we can't get elsewhere." Jordan's face was grim. "Oh, I have the picture, believe me. It's no more manufacture than it is a recreation spot."
Assumptions are a bitch. They just don't get you to any good outcome.
"Lectures from my son."
Dead stop. He faced Jordan. I passed my majority some years ago, Dad, and you know it's damned likely we're bugged. So what in hell are you doing? Trying to piss off Yanni? I tell you, I really don't appreciate being dragged into your quarrel with the kid you never met.
Are you afraid? Have they made you afraid?
The answer is no. No, I'm not afraid. I'm comfortable. I support Yanni. I support Ari, for that matter. I hope she has a long and happy career. And if you'll take my advice and just live here, I'm sure you'll get along. If you want to fight for a fight's sake, I'm sure you'll get it from someone. I just don't see the point in it.
He walked on with Grant. Jordan stayed beside him, Paul just behind. "Too beaten down, too little fire. I missed your growing up."
Oh, plenty you missed, I assure you. You didn't miss anything good. But that's what we dealt with while you had your own troubles. It's finished. Done is done. If you didn't kill Ari,
I didn't. You know it was a frame. He stopped, beyond the columns, in the public corridor, and faced Jordan.
I reserve judgment. You might have killed her, to protect your investment in me. Or Dennis Nye thought she was going to die anyway, and a clone would be manageable, especially in his hands, and you weren't connected to the right people to protect you. Whatever happened, it didn't work for you. For good or for ill, you missed my growing up. You missed my times in detention. You missed my being worked over by security, and you missed Grant's troubles too, but, we just can't recover those happy days, can we? So let's not try. I'll take your word that you were innocent. You'll take mine that I believe you. We'll both get along.
We'll talk about this tomorrow, in the office.
Damn it, Dad, you can't come in there. It's a security clearance area, and you haven't got one. So keep out.
Jordan reached into his pocket and held out a card. Justin started to take it, automatically, and when he stalled in sudden apprehension that it had nothing to do with the office or the security clearance issue, Jordan reached out and dropped it into his coat pocket. He wasn't a kid to skip out of the way. It was ludicrous.
It was also an attack.
Damn it, Jordan.
Damn what?
He'd had earnest hopes when he'd heard Jordan was released and when Jordan made it home to a changed Reziun that he'd have the father he'd been deprived of during all the nigh years. Everything would be healed and clean and new. Neither Paul nor Grant said a word to what had just happened. He wanted to take the card out of his pocket, fling it away to be trampled by passers-by, swept up by the cleaning bots, pounced on by security. He didn't even reach into his pocket to look at it. I really don't appreciate this, Dad.
Tomorrow, Jordan said. See you tomorrow. That's still one of your non-teaching days, isn't it?
No, he said. You are not moving in with us.
Tomorrow, Jordan said again, the way he'd just held his ground in arguments 2 decades ago. No argument, just a position from which he wouldn't budge. That was my office.
Damn it, Jordan.
My office, I say. Sure you won't come over for an after-dinner drink?
Good night,
Justin said, and started off in his own direction, toward the doors. Grant walked beside him, not saying a word until they'd exited the corridor for the outside and started across the darkened quadrangle. You told him no, Grant said, but he will come ahead tomorrow anyway, won't he?
My bet is on it, he said, and we've got to advise the staff. Lock up the office if we have to. Damn him, Grant. Damn him. All he has to do to fit in is just do nothing. That's the only requirement. Just settle in, don't push any buttons, and let things be.
Grant said nothing in reply, and Justin remembered that face, set and angry. Jordan, his elder twin, biologically speaking. Twin psychologically speaking, so far as being raised by his father went. Next best thing to psychogenesis. Ari's face, too. Elder Ari's face. A glass in his hand, the feeling of being drugged. Sex, and a voice saying... He couldn't remember what she'd said. To this day, it blacked out at that point. He'd tried not to let his father know what had happened. He'd tried so hard. But too many had known. And he'd spent his next years being arrested for the suspicion of thinking. He'd given up his father's head-on attack on life and adopted a stubbornness that laid low, laid modest plans, and just survived into the next Ari's growing up to become a general annoyance to Dennis Nye. Mirror into mirror, physically, himself with Jordan. But the psychology Jordan knew in his son had been worked on and worked over every time they'd arrested him and hauled him in. He suspected they'd tried to bend him, at least. But cracking any working the first Ari had done, that wasn't easy. He'd been set on a course. He'd even begun to cling to it, mentally, telling himself from the start that the Nyes could have done the murder themselves, and that they might someday kill him, but they weren't going to crack him, because he was Ari's piece of work. What kept him alive, he greatly suspected, was the fact they couldn't tell whether he was somehow essential in the plans Ari had laid down, essential in the construction of her own psychological and physiological clone. The genius that had made Reziun what it was had to be reborn to keep the power Reziun had, which was currently in their hands. And if Justin Warrick was somehow part of it, the Nyes had to keep him alive. They'd gone into convulsions of policy when their precious clone had found her way to him. They hadn't known what to do with him after that, except to try to make sure he didn't come up with any working of his own, where it regarded the little girl who'd become a bigger girl, who'd become a young woman, and developed notions her guardians finally couldn't control. Sex prominent among them. He'd gotten away from her. He'd known that was worth his life, but the Nyes weren't what scared hell out of him in that regard. What scared him was young Ari herself, the fact that there was no predicting what psychological trigger could go off in that interface, as if whatever the first Ari had done had set a mark on him that wouldn't stay quiet if he ever got involved with child Ari. It wasn't where he wanted to go. It wasn't who he was supposed to be. His whole being shrieked no, and he backed away. And Jordan came back into his life, now that the Nyes were done, and now that Yanni Schwartz was in charge. Yanni sat sphinx-like behind his desk, watching all the pieces shift on the board, doubtless wondering whether the piece that was Justin Warrick would gravitate to the troublesome piece that was Jordan, and whether Jordan would gravitate back to his old intention of getting out of Rezun and attacking its policies from the outside. Jordan had had contacts that had had contacts with the Paxers, the abolitionists, and he'd had friends at the opposite end of the spectrum, the Defense Bureau, who'd been the first Ari's allies, but who simultaneously wanted to get the upper hand over Rezun. And Jordan had dealt with them. Back then, dealt with every contact on the planet he could use to break Rezun's power and overthrow the system. They were all watched, constantly, had been for years, and Yanni reported regularly to an 18-year-old girl who would own absolute power over Rezun Labs whenever she wanted to take it up. Within a decade, the corporation that was creating population and civilization in the farthest reaches of human exploration would come back under the control of a second Ariane Emery. And a third Ariane, someday. That event was already in the planning stages. Every detail of young Ari's life was being stored up, the way the first Ari's life had been stored. And come the day, the inevitable day, the question would be, which of the two Aris ought to be born again? And how many of the people who'd been part and parcel of the second Ari's life had to be recreated, and which Ari were those replicates going to have to deal with? He had a horrid suspicion a storage somewhere now had his data. Oh, one sec. He had a horrid suspicion of a storage somewhere now had his data, and Grant's programming, and maybe Yanni's. Gerard Nye, who had probably never looked to face such an event, was already less than a year from rebirth. Dennis Nye, the shadowy eminence who'd run the labs in the interim years, was still a question mark, but he'd bet a year's pay which way that decision was going to go. Ari's teenaged emotions were still in the ascendant, but the cold, keen intellect was rising fast. He didn't know how much of that situation Jordan knew. How did you tell your father you, and therefore he, through you, were destined for immortality, right along with the original Ari, Jordan's one-time partner and lifelong rival, all to help her exist again and go on shaping humankind for all eternity? It wasn't going to make for family tranquility once Jordan got that picture. That was for very damned certain. And that city young Ari was founding upriver from Rezun Labs? Who was going to live there, except people that Ari didn't want living under Rezun's roof, or downriver in Novgorod either, where the government and other troubles resided? "It should have been a pleasant evening," he remarked, in the chill, deep silence of the deserted quadrangle, the absence, usually, of electronic bugs, unless somebody was aiming ears specifically at them. And he wouldn't say absolutely that that wasn't the case, given the red flag of Jordan's invitation. "I tried to look forward to it." He felt the card in his pocket, a little paper card. "Tried?" Grant asked. "He's bitter," Justin said. "I can't blame him for that part of his attitude. 20 years in exile." "Against whom should he be bitter?" Grant asked. Judging CIT emotions was not what he was born to do. "You? Does he blame you because you work with young Ari? Is it Yanni he dislikes? Or did I miss the entire point of that discussion?" "No, you didn't miss it. He blames me for coming out of it on her side. That's one thing." "They're all dead, all the ones actually responsible for his situation. Yanni's alive, but Yanni didn't send your father away, did he?" "He didn't, exactly.
Or he actually may have, but the deal probably saved Jordan's life. But the fact those responsible are dead now is only one more frustration for him. A slice of his life is gone in those 2 decades. He could live 100 years more on Rejuve, but all he sees is the 20 years he lost, and the fact that he's robbed of a fight about it. And what he really wants, between you and me, is no Rezion.
Several more paces in silence. What would take its place? Grant asked. Does he know that?
I didn't say it was a reasonable attitude.
He's as intelligent as either of us.
That's no guarantee of rationality.
I've observed that occasionally, Grant said dryly. It was worth a dry laugh, even under the circumstances.
What I've said still holds, Justin said. You're not to go anywhere near him without me, and you're not to occupy a room with him or Paul without me, and you're not to take seriously anything he tells you privately, not even if he tells you I'm dying. Just, no matter how finely you dice it, stay away from him.
He created me. Rezion forever holds my contract, and you're my supervisor. I know what's right.
Contract hell. Protect yourself.
Protecting myself, I protect you. That's logical, isn't it?
Very. I'm glad you see it that way.
Someone is by the pond, Grant remarked. And it was true. A shadow stood near the small fish pond ahead of them, where quadrangle walks crossed. 4 benches offered seating there to anybody who wanted to contemplate the water. A pleasant place to sit and think on a sunny summer day. It was still April, it was long after dark, and the wind was up. Their ordinary coats were barely enough to make a walk to the other wing bearable. And somebody was standing there in the dark. Somebody in dark, close-fitting clothing. The shadow watched the water. It might be a despondent lover, somebody wanting solitude. It might have nothing to do with them. But fear had been a constant in the nigh years. Fear of arrest. Fear of being tampered with, of having Grant tampered with. Ari was their only protection. And Ari wasn't going out of her wing lately. The figure had been intent on the water. Now the head turned. The whole body turned to stand, confronting them. "Sir," the shadow said politely as they met, and recognition revised the shadowed vision into familiar detail. The black elite security uniform, dark curly hair, light build. Florian, Ari's personal bodyguard. A youth no older than Ari herself, with absolute power to arrest, to kill, without a second's warning. And he had that damned card in his pocket.
Jordan proposes to share your office,
Florian said.
I told him no.
Surely Ari's security knew he had. He'd bet his life they'd heard every word of it. And it was better than other alternatives.
Let him have it. Your materials will go to another office.
Florian held out a key card, offering it. He took it. He had no choice but take it, in a hand growing chill through.
But our personnel...
Sorry, sir. They'll have to find other employment. They aren't cleared for Wing 1.
They're our people.
No longer.
And the computers, our files. We have notes, handwritten notes. The order they're in delicate position. Stacks that can't be disrupted without losing information. We're not that neat. Things we can't have just anybody rifling through, for God's sake. It's a mess, but we know where things are. Things in the safe. Look, if we have to do this, we can go over there tonight. We need to do this ourselves. We're willing to do it ourselves.
We're aware of the state of your office, Florian said. Dark humor at his expense, he had no idea. And qualified personnel will perform the transfer.
We need to go over there.
Best you don't, sir, so the persons moving it can do so with the greatest attention to detail. All the items will be there in the morning, in their original order, and new equipment will be in place in your former office by 0500.
For him. Bugged equipment.
Absolutely.
He'll think I arranged this. No matter how you explain it, he'll think I had something to do with this.
Unfortunate if so, sir. But your notes will be safe, and your staff will be safe, in other employ, at a priority. They'll be given employment, no problem. Just not Wing 1. At least they wouldn't miss a paycheck. M and the others. They'd be all right. But they were the ones that knew his work. They'd been his people. No wipe. No wipe, sir. Nothing of the sort. This with a slight shift of the shadowed gaze toward Grant and back. We ask you to accept this arrangement and not attempt to circumvent it in any fashion. Grant, you're not to go there either.
My father won't take this well at all, Justin said. I'm afraid he'll be in Yanni's office in the morning.
We'll advise the director. It's not your problem, sir.
I appreciate your concern. The cold of the night had penetrated his dinner jacket. He felt a shiver coming on. I'm freezing at the moment. Can you tell me... I take it was Ari ordered this?
Sarah has retired for the evening. We're operating on our own discretion, on Sarah's general instruction. We'll inform Sarah in the morning. You won't need to.
And where is this new office?
Downstairs, ground level, and a right turn from your apartment. More convenient, and a better office, I believe. There's room for staff, but it will be Wing 1 approved staff.
Yanni Schwartz didn't maintain an office in that high-security territory. He had one already, a cubbyhole he used for Ari's lessons. Downstairs, those rooms, they had a historic connection with the old Wing 1 lab where the first Ari had died. That lab had been decommissioned now, and he didn't know how up-to-date the offices in that area were these days, whether they were still tied into system. But Florian said their computers were coming over. They must be.
Do go on, sir, Florian said. You're chilled. Good night to you.
Thank you, he said, and started on his way, Grant attending without a word. Then he thought of Jordan's card in his pocket, wondered, all in a rush, what sort of trouble he could bring down on Jordan's head, and considered the fact that Florian hadn't asked him for it. Florian didn't know? Something had slipped past Ari's staff? It had been a surreptitious handoff. But Raytheon Security surely knew. Florian might let him go his way, but someone inside Ari's wing might confront him yet. Maybe Catelyn. Maybe, worse thought, someone he didn't know, out of Raytheon Sec, and that was more trouble than he wanted. He'd been fluxed by the office matter. He had an excuse for having forgotten. But an Azzy of Florian's bent didn't flux. Not for 2 seconds running. Florian damned well hadn't forgotten it. He stopped, turned, reached into his pocket, pulled out the thin card. Florian. Florian. Florian had walked in the other direction, was a diminished figure in the dark, but he heard and stopped. I'll take it to him, Grant said. He surrendered it without a word. Grant knew. Grant had seen Jordan's action. Grant knew his reasoning the way Grant knew their situation from the inside out. Grant crossed the dark distance between them, delivered the card, and walked back again. Florian stood there a moment, until Grant reached him, took the card, then turned and pursued his way back to admin, where they had come from, and maybe on to the education wing beyond it, where their office was, or had been. Damn, he said when Grant joined him. Damn it, Grant. Do you know what was on the card? Grant asked. I haven't the faintest. It may be a joke for all I know. I don't want to know. Damn him.
I intend to evade Jordan's company in private, Grant said. I'm relatively confident I could, even if we shared an office. But it seems the question is settled for now. Settled, Justin found himself saying, and realized it was impossible the second the word came out of his mouth. It isn't settled. Not with him. Whatever quarrel he had with his Ari isn't mine. It wasn't my choice to support young Ari against him, but... But? He'll keep it going. And maybe he's justified. Maybe he's pure and right, and just my living here put me on the other side. I've missed him all these years, but here I am living on the other side, in her wing, working in her wing. A different Ari. A very different Ari.
We don't know how different she'll become as time passes.
Even Azzy, Grant said, aren't identical.
But her interests are the same as the first Ari's.
The people who pursued us are dead.
And all being reincarnated.
He reached the door, and stopped there, in the wind and the dark, in the last haven before they went into heavily monitored Wing 1.
Maybe that concept ought to bother me more than it does.
You think that constitutes Jordan's motive in this? That he believes she'll eventually become his enemy?
I think it's personal. I think it's him against Ari. All the traits that make her and him. My immortality, if they do that to us, won't be his. I don't know if he'll see it that way, but we're not, thank God, psychological twins. I'm myself. I'm the first of myself. The only.
I understand that, Grant said, who was also the first and only of his kind. So far.
Thinking about it makes me a little crazy.
You're not crazy. Your actions have been completely logical, given the flux.
Including giving her security that card? Jordan's going to land in trouble for it, and I set him up for it.
No, he set you up for it. You simply returned the favor.
Cool, clear, utterly reasonable. He shivered in the cold wind.
Sometimes I don't understand him. I just don't understand him. Or I don't want to.
Your father is intelligent. He is capable of staying out of trouble. He simply declines to do that.
And it's what you always said. CITs have their logic sets installed late. Emotions on the bottom, logic on the top. Sometimes it's a complete bitch-up.
Apparently.
I wish I could talk to him. Damn, I wish I could talk to him. Sensibly. Logically. You see how it goes. You saw how it went Sunday night.
A moment passed.
I have a question.
Ask.
Should we be physically afraid of him?
He had to think about that. There was one fair answer, one answer that would protect both of them.
Yes,
he said, and slid his apartment keycard into the outside door lock. The door opened, letting them into the foyer for a dozen other ID programs to work over.
Maybe we should be.
Book 1, Section 1, Chapter 9. April 25, 2424, 2039 hours. Justin and Grant had reached their apartment. The door shut and locked. The light on the console showed green, safe. They were in, and their conversation on the way had been scant and worried. Tracking had flicked from one station to the next, and surveillance had been hard-pressed to keep up with the two parties, homeward bound in opposite directions. Justin and Grant weren't the problem. Jordan was. And he, with Paul, had gone home, too, talking about library access and his intention of calling Yanni Schwartz in the morning. Catelyn flicked a switch, passing the watch back to the senior Rezunsec team that watched over Wing 1, entry by entry, movement by movement.
Oh my gosh, my bookmark, it rebelleth.
Florian was on his way back. So was Marco from education, having ascertained that Jordan had made no detours. She and Florian had one paramount interest in their action tonight, protecting Ari, which was to say, keeping certain individuals away from Ari, tracking the activities and interactions of absolutely everyone who even casually crossed into her security zone. Secondary was protecting Justin. That was Syrah's explicit and standing order. And third priority was a general and constant surveillance, keeping abreast of a list of individuals outside Rezun whose whereabouts and safety could impact Rezun's operations. Rezunsec, under Security Director Hicks, had numerous agents solely dedicated to that purpose, and that office informed them of what Hicks deemed necessary to tell them. But, occasionally crossing Hicks's office, they had their own watch list of troublesome individuals inside Rezun. It wasn't the first time they'd mounted their own surveillance, no matter what Hicks did or didn't do, as tonight, when Hicks had wanted to bug the restaurant, but they had done it themselves, told Hicks to stay out, and fed the information to Hicks as it came available, promising that for Hicks's promise to stand back. Yanni's coming for dinner in Wing 1, for instance, aroused no particular alarms. The director's contacts, the ones he himself chose, were either clean or they were obligations he dealt with for ascertainable reasons, even if Sarah had been angry with him for matters she'd declined to mention to them. Yanni came into Wing 1 with no large security contingent and sent no orders to Hicks. But she and Wes had been in position. If Sarah had indicated Yanni should be detained or otherwise dealt with, it would have happened, and a very specific code would have flashed to Florian, triggering yet other actions, as best they could manage, as fast as they could manage. But there had been no such outcome. Yanni's companion Azzy, Frank AF, shadowed Yanni everywhere, as closely and as obsessively as they followed Ari. Frank was out of Green Barracks, like themselves, and while Frank was, like Yanni, a little reticent on Yanni's personal business, he was certainly a solid type, and absolutely loyal, not only to Yanni, but to the entity Yanni served, which was Rezun itself. So Frank was a watch-it, but no great worry. What clustered around Justin Warrick, however, was a different matter, and dealing with him was not simple. Justin and Grant had not a single close contact except Yanni that they did trust on that level. It was a constant worry that those two personally had Sarah's clearance, residing right next door. But Sarah maintained they were important to her, and insisted that they were securely hers, so they took measures, Sarah being unavailable for consultation. They had had to improvise tonight and move fast, and in such a way that what they did could be amended, if Sarah ordered. That move was underway, via their access to specialized housekeeping over in admin, which was intended, perhaps, for Ari's own use. They used it. And it had made Justin Warrick a special problem. Justin and Grant constituting a pair that were supposed to be free to come and go as they chose, but who also had to be protected against certain decidedly unsafe contacts. Notably, henceforward, Jordan Warrick. Jordan Warrick was number 1 on the watch-it list, until Sarah countermanded that, and by what they heard tonight, they were right. Right now, Jordan Warrick was in the same category with a handful of Azzy who had worked closely with Dennis and Gerard Nye, and who ought not to be admitted to the administrative wings. Administrative wings? I don't know. You can go either way with that one. I know I can, and I have. I'm just that special. I'm just that inconsistent. Jordan Warrick did come and go as he pleased inside admin and education, and was only restricted in library and completely barred from Wing 1, a situation which greatly offended him. Justin thought he'd go straight over to Yanni in the morning, complaining, and that would be a disturbance, perhaps provoking an intervention from Yanni. So things that had happened tonight might grow more complicated in the morning. They would have to brief Sarah once she waked, about the late supper, the meeting, and their preemptive action, and it seemed at least likely she would approve. Sarah had previously discussed moving Justin out of convenient range of Jordan. The office Justin and Grant used, previously Jordan's, had never been outstandingly secure. The staff lacked adequate clearance for reasons of inadequate security training. That situation, exposing Justin to hazard, had never been to their liking, and now they had found an excuse to solve the problem. Catelyn personally hoped they had solved it in some lasting fashion, and personally hoped, too, that they could manage something to be rid of Jordan Warrick, even if Sarah had brought him here. Florian arrived back in the wing. Catelyn noted the flash of ID on the readout as the outer door opened and shut. She sat and waited, checking the monitors. So was a Razun Sec squad down in main security watching on night shift. Hicks's eyes were technically on the job, but Hicks himself would be abed, his second-in-command, Kyle A.K., probably on duty. And, being Azzy, Kyle A.K. would theoretically be accounting for his decisions to Hicks in the morning, which would give them time, if Sarah slept late, to inform Sarah before their actions began to racket through several systems. Second flash from the console. Florian had deactivated and reactivated the alarm within system as he entered the apartment. Soft footsteps outside. Florian arrived in the security office doorway, came in, and disposed himself in a chair, booted feet propped luxuriantly in the neighboring seat. He held up a small card between two fingers. "What is it?" Catelyn had seen the handoff. Both handoffs. "A business card. Contact number, in Novgorod." He spun around in the chair, touched a few buttons, put the card in the visual scanner. Not the reader, sensible precaution, for a card with a reader strip. He looked at the screen, punched more buttons, and retrieved the card. See, he's clever. The thought that went through my head, and I was going to mention between chapterlets, was, hey, Jordan Warrick's a sneaky son of a bitch, and he probably thought, hey, my son, being the traitor that he is going to give this card over to either Razun Sec or Ari, and then I'll get a virus on their system or something. So they're obviating that. Incidentally, pretty much the same reason you shouldn't scan random QR codes that you don't know the source of, because you can do all sorts of really fun jiggery pokery with those. Really spooky stuff without much recourse other than to avoid doing it at all. He looked at the screen, punched more buttons, and retrieved the card. A professor in Novgorod University, and the card wasn't printed on any Razun printer. An educator. Jordan Works education tape. We'll investigate the number on the card. I'm sure Jordan wants us to, or wants Hicks to. Maybe Jordan's trying to lead the investigation astray or get someone else in trouble. A Novgorod address, from the hand of a man who had no recent contacts outside Planis and Razun. Justin, too, had not quite promptly turned it over to Sarah's security, but there was that connection to Jordan, a born-man connection, emotional and difficult to parse. Catelyn afforded him a little latitude for that, but not too much. "We aren't likely to understand this," Catelyn said. "It seems unreasonable on Jordan's part. It seems unlikely for him to have such a thing, unless he received it from someone in Razun. It seems we've moved Justin none too soon. Jordan's action toward Justin seems to be an aggression. Justin knew he was watched, but so did Jordan. Did Justin forget the card when he met you, do you think, or did it take him a moment to make up his mind?" "Surrendering it would betray Jordan," Florian said. "That may have taken a moment for him to decide." "But Justin knew he was watched. He knew in advance he knew in advance he would be stopped." "He could guess he would be stopped. The end would be the same, whether he turned it over to me or whether Razun Sec asked for it. Perhaps he wasn't thinking of that yet. He had just argued with Jordan. Perhaps Jordan wanted him to be stopped, to make him angry with admin. Possible. Neither of them is stupid," Catelyn said. "Same gene set. One won't easily get the better of the other. But Jordan has lost something tonight. Justin won't be in his reach. He won't like that. I wonder if this card is worth it." "How did Justin seem?" "You heard the exchange." "I didn't see Justin's face." "He expressed distress at disturbance to his work, which I'm sure he knows is being copied. He showed no particular reluctance to be separated from Jordan. He had warned Grant to avoid being alone with Jordan." "I heard that part. He thought there was a physical danger." "To Grant, did he mean? Or to him?" "To Grant, likely. But anything that would harm Grant would harm him. They're partners." "No choice but to get them out tonight," she said with a shake of her head. Well that we did it. Can Section 3 handle the transfer top to bottom? Will they bring it over in time, or do we have to go through Hicks's office?" "They indicate yes, they will.
I put it through as an emergency. I think that's accurate. They'll tell Hicks in the morning, likely. Hicks will get the copies they make in Justin's office. I'm not happy about Hicks's access, but the alternative is much worse. Meanwhile, we need to put through Justin's address change. Inside Sarah's wing, he won't be having his files copied again. Easily done. She spun her chair about, her fingers flew for a moment, and she sent, registering Justin Warrick's new office address with Yanni's office, and incidentally with Razunsac. That handled details that might have inconvenienced Justin in the morning, just to keep him calm in the transfer. For Jordan Warrick's imminent inconvenience, or state of mind in the morning, she had no great concern at all. I'm going to reread that. That handled details that might have inconvenienced Justin in the morning, just to keep him calm in the transfer. For Jordan Warrick's imminent inconvenience, or state of mind in the morning, she had no great concern at all. One thing did worry her. Sarah's papers are in that safe. Not now, Florian said. Marco took them before Section 3 could arrive. They'll be in the office Sarah uses. They trusted no one completely, she and Florian, and, on certain levels, meant they didn't trust Hicks's office or Yanni's to run things, or to hold information that might bear on Ari's security. Their predecessors had failed, by all outside accounts, and died. Deservedly so, because they had let their Ari die, and let Dennis Nye take over Razun. They took that event as a personal failure, a fault committed by their gene sets, and they were absolutely determined to better the record in their tenure. They were not about to lose their Ari to Jordan Warrick, if it had been Jordan that murdered Ari-1, as the public records officially said had happened, though that certainly wasn't the whole story, and Sarah agreed that they had had every reason to blame Dennis Nye's staff for the crime. It didn't matter. Dennis Nye and his personal guard were dead and past. They guarded against Jordan, knowing he could have killed the first Ari, that he had wanted to kill her. That was the salient point. They didn't altogether understand Jordan Warrick. His actions sat deep in a very complex CIT psychology, a man so brilliant he was a special, but all but immune to the law. Sarah said the long exile had made him angry, and the focus of that anger might be her existence, which had defined the term of his exile. For their part, not understanding the man simply meant being on their guard against him, and they constantly were. They didn't understand Justin Warrick either, though they knew him better. Knew, for instance, that Justin Warrick had initially welcomed his father back to Razun, and had disagreements with him. Justin himself had not been the one to apply for Jordan's Aris from... Aris, what the... Bleh. Oh no! Aris!
Reese Witherspoon.
Justin himself had not been the one to apply for Jordan's release from detention. It had been, in fact, Sarah herself who had brought Jordan back from exile, which brought a very dangerous man back into a place where he could be more dangerous, in their estimation. But Sarah had moved fast to get Jordan out of military reach, and out of the reach of any dissident attempt to contact him. There was a leak in Planis. They knew that. A leak could turn into an access for all sorts of mischief, from assassination to rescue. Sarah had been right. But letting Jordan stay in Razun now that things were tranquil had taken turns into CIT politics, a decision on Sarah's part, possibly to avoid upsetting Justin. Just wait, Ari had said, in discussing the matter. He's not Justin. It's the same gene set, but the first Aris changed Justin's psych set. Jordan hated her for that. Jordan had hated the first Ari well before she'd taken Justin. That was true, too. Jordan had briefly been the first Ari's working partner, sharing ideas, sharing power. Except, Sarah had said further, that neither of those two was of a nature to share anything. So the partnership had dissolved into a feud, More bitter on Jordan's side than on Ari's in terms of overt anger, Sarah said, but not in terms of who had gotten in the first strike. The first Ari had converted Justin to her own design, appropriated Grant along with him. Jordan wanted Justin and Grant back, two assets their own Ari very much wanted for herself. That implied that there would inevitably be trouble in that quarter, and there Ari had chosen to live right beside Justin, kept him in her wing, all except his office staff, which he had clung to, and that was the reason Justin maintained his office over an education. Well, as of now, Sarah's wing had Justin's office too, and the staff was gone. Now there was no actual reason for Justin ever to leave her highly secure perimeter and cross Jordan's path, unless Justin chose to do that, which would be many fewer opportunities, and ones they could watch. First on the list, they had to be sure Justin was comfortable in his new office, to keep him and Sarah happy. And they could expect that Jordan was going to be furious when he found out in the morning that the office was shut and empty, and it could be all his, for what they cared. They had even left a request for Hicks to officially allow Jordan possession of that office, with staff if he asked, a request it was likely for several reasons might go through. They smoothed things over, not willing to provoke the man by their own action. Sarah might not approve that. Catelyn keyed a screen up, saw Jordan and Paul standing in the living room of their apartment, Jordan with a drink in hand. There would be a record of that conversation. She could scan it visually faster than she could listen to it. "They've gotten to him," was the only thing that truly leapt out of the current transcript. She took the reference as applying to Justin, and understood "they" to mean Sarah and her whole apparatus. It was true. There was also nothing Jordan could do about it. I don't know why I hop-skipped and jumped around that one on the cadence. It was true. There was also nothing Jordan could do about it. Much better. There was no reference to the card with the Novgorod number. Florian had set the card on the console and looked at the screen. "Patil," he said. "Dr. Sandor Patil, University at Novgorod." Catelyn focused in on that, sharply. "One of Yanni's meetings in Novgorod was with that person. Sarah has a list. I have Patil's CIT number. I asked System for a bio." "Call it." She located the file. Professor of Science, but under the Defense Bureau's Secrecy Act. Lecturer in the Franklin series, whatever that was. Expert in nanistics, and Catelyn did not know about that. It meant microtags, stable and self-mutating nanostructures. It meant a whole class of contraband for customs, and it was a bioweapon, besides its commercial uses in medicine and manufacture, which she had never looked up, but she sent out a search. "Nanistics. I'm calling up references." Florian copied her screen to his console. Nanistics, the information came back, was a course of study not banned from theoretical research or commercial use on Cyteen's surface and on Cyteen Alpha Station, but all actual experimental work was done out at Beta Station, at the deep end of the solar system. There was a lab at Beta serving both defense and science. The science was used on Cyteen, in Razun, mostly in medical or agricultural research, or in the manufacture of carefully selected exotics, particularly in replication of Earth or Pell goods. And a cross-search with Patil involved university offerings, lectures, Paxer and abolitionist attendance. Nanistics and Patil had been a major part of the terraforming project, now cancelled. The Preservation Act had excluded certain types of bionanistics from Cyteen's surface. Bionanistics and Patil wound through the list. The inquiry rapidly developed side branches. A lot of them. Right now, the words of interests were clearly Nanistics, Patil, Planus, and Warrick, any two of those words in association, and that search had produced one other warning flag. More information is available from 1,381 sources requiring higher base. 142,382 sources are in library behind gateway access.
Proceed Y/M.
Base 1, Serah's base, could cross that threshold. It warned when it was about to go somewhere securitied, and it didn't leave footprints in system. But it would draw a lot of securitied information into their office, and that was worth a little hesitation. No, Catelyn decided, but interesting, Catelyn said. Patil is someone Yanni was talking to. He told Serah they were going to terraform a world called Eversnow, and it's not public knowledge. He was talking to Dr. Patil. And Florian asked, how did Jordan know Yanni was meeting with her? And on that dramatic question note, we will call it for today.
How's that sound? That sound good to you crazy folks? Good. Good.
Yeesh, we just keep increasing the number of, It's true. My next bit. For my next trick, I'll need a volunteer. With any luck, we'll get through all of Section 2 the day after tomorrow.
That sounds good.
Anyway, that's where we will call it for today.
Where's my backup? There it is. I found it. Boom.
So yeah, lots of politicking, learning about some space economics, learning about, some serious dissembling, some scheming, some plotting, some shenanigans. What is Jordan up to? Good questions, all. Anyway, good stuff. Just checking real quick to make sure that I haven't had my YouTube channel canceled. Because I have not kept as close an eye on it as maybe I should.
Anything? Nothing? Nothing. Good. That's dynamite.
Let's see if there's any love notes or comments. I try to keep up on those. Yes. What do we got?
What do we got?
Oh, yeah. Foster Hales, 1287 comments on the Nightland. You don't need to switch accents so much. Yeah. That was pretty bad. But we did it anyway. I'm not terribly resistant to peer pressure or something. I don't know. I got egged on. I'm not going to blame anyone but myself for that. He's right. They are right. Masser7769 comments on Hyperion Cantos. Happy I found this channel. Excited to listen to Endymion next. These first two books were sweet. And Piers Sticks comments on... I'm pretty sure that's Absolution. The fourth Area X book. Yeah, that's from that one. I like that old Jim sounds like old man Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino. Perfect characterization. Now that I think about it, that's probably what I'm pulling from there. There's a couple others. There's a small stable of things I pull from, and I try to occasionally remix them and use them in weird contexts. And then on something on Snow Crash, Musky Husky 84 comments, the lack of editing adds to the story, not gonna lie, very Princess Bride, and that is the kind of stuff I want to hear. Justification for my actions. Good enough for me, says I. And why not? We'll do our weekly check for Rifters content. Let's see if our boy, our man, the myth, the legend, Peter Watts as anything new and relevant. Excuse me. Probably not. Nope, nada. Nothing, honey. Not a single gosh darn blessed thing. That's the way it goes sometimes. That's the way you just might find yourself in the clutches of some wild love. Was ist los? What was I doing? I don't remember. Anyway, good times. Good times. Things are moving along in the Regenesis verse. Alrighty. I will see you the day after tomorrow. And until then, stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other, be toasty or cool as per your geolocation and preferences permit, and be decent to each other.